You let people close, but not all the way. There's always a door you don't open, a room you don't show, a version of yourself that stays quietly behind glass while the rest of you performs being known. And the strange thing is, you're good at connection. People like you. People feel comfortable around you. Some of them would even say they know you well. But you know the truth. Nobody has ever seen the whole thing. And some part of you is making sure it stays that way. Today, we're going to talk about why. Not in a surface way. Not you just need to open up more. In the deep, neurologically real, psychologically specific way that actually explains what's happening and why it makes complete sense that it developed the way it did. Let's start with what this fear actually is, because most people call it trust issues, or shyness, or introversion, but those aren't quite right. The fear of being truly known is something more specific. It's the fear that if someone saw the complete version of you, your contradictions, your failures, your ugliest thoughts, your neediest moments, the parts you've spent years editing out of every relationship, they would decide you weren't worth staying for. It's not the fear of people leaving. It's the fear of people leaving because of you, because of what you actually are. And that distinction is everything.
Psychologists trace this fear to what Dr. Brené Brown, after more than 2 decades of research on shame and vulnerability, calls the core shame belief. The belief, not always conscious, often buried beneath years of functioning perfectly well, that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. Not what you did, not what happened to you. You. And that if anyone ever got close enough to really see it, the relationship would not survive the revelation. This belief doesn't arrive from nowhere. It gets built. Slowly. Quietly. Through experiences that taught you, sometimes through words, more often through silence, through withdrawal, through the look on someone's face, that certain versions of you were not acceptable. Maybe you were too emotional and learned that emotion made people uncomfortable. Maybe you were too needy and learned that need drove people away. Maybe you showed someone something true about yourself and they used it against you. Or maybe nobody did anything dramatic at all. Maybe you just grew up in an environment where being fully seen simply never felt safe. Where the unspoken rule was, keep it together. Don't be too much. Don't need too much. And above all, don't let anyone see the parts that aren't holding together. And so you learned. You became extraordinarily good at being almost known. At giving people enough to feel close without giving them enough to actually get there. You mastered the art of selective disclosure, sharing things that sound vulnerable but don't actually cost you anything. Stories from your past that are far enough away to feel safe. Opinions that are genuine but not your most genuine. Emotions that are real but not your realest. You built a version of yourself for public consumption that is genuinely likable, genuinely warm, genuinely present, and genuinely incomplete. And here's the cruel irony that Dr. Brown's research identified with devastating precision. The very thing you're most afraid of, being alone, being unloved, being abandoned, is being guaranteed by the strategy you're using to prevent it. Because you cannot be truly loved by someone who doesn't truly know you. What they love is the curated version, the edited self. And no matter how much love that version receives, it never reaches the part of you that actually needs it. The love lands, but it lands on the performance. And somewhere underneath the performance, the real version of you stays untouched, unseen, and profoundly alone. This is what researchers call the intimacy paradox. The closer people get, the more the fear activates. Because the closer someone gets, the more they might see. And so the person who is most afraid of being alone is also the person most likely to keep people at a carefully managed distance, close enough to feel connected, far enough to stay safe. But let's go deeper, because the neuroscience here is fascinating, and it explains why this fear feels so automatic, so impossible to think your way out of. The brain's threat detection system, centered in the amygdala, does not distinguish between physical danger and social danger. To your nervous system, the possibility of being truly seen and rejected is processed with the same urgency as a physical threat. Your heart rate increases, your body tenses, your mind starts generating exit strategies. And all of this happens before your conscious mind has even decided whether or not to trust the person in front of you. This is why you can logically know that someone is safe, know it completely, have years of evidence for it, and still find yourself holding back in the moment that would require real vulnerability. It's not a decision. It's a reflex, a deeply wired, deeply practiced reflex that your nervous system developed specifically to keep you safe from a pain it has experienced before. Research on attachment theory, originally developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by researchers like Mary Ainsworth and Sue Johnson, shows that our earliest experiences of being seen or not seen by our primary caregivers literally wire the templates our nervous system uses for all future intimate relationships. If being vulnerable in childhood led to rejection, withdrawal, criticism, or simply indifference, the nervous system records that information, and it builds a strategy. A strategy that says the closer someone gets, the more careful you need to be. Attachment researchers call this pattern fearful avoidant attachment. People with this pattern simultaneously want deep connection and are terrified of it. They're drawn toward intimacy and pull back from it at the same time. They fall in love and then find a reason, sometimes real, sometimes manufactured, to create distance. They open up and then immediately regret it. They push people away and then grieve the distance they created. They live in a constant internal contradiction. I want you to know me. Please don't actually know me. And they are often the most perceptive, most empathetic, most deeply feeling people in any room, because the same sensitivity that made them vulnerable to being hurt by not being seen is the same sensitivity that makes them extraordinary at seeing others. They give the thing they cannot receive. They offer the safety they cannot allow themselves to inhabit. So what actually changes this? Because telling someone with this fear to just be vulnerable is like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off. The instruction is technically correct and completely unhelpful. What the research shows, particularly from the field of emotionally focused therapy developed by Dr. Sue Johnson, is that this pattern changes, not through insight alone, but through experience. Through the repeated experience of being seen and not abandoned, of showing something true and having it met with warmth rather than withdrawal, of taking a small risk with a safe person and surviving it, and then taking another one and another. It doesn't require showing everything to everyone at once. It requires showing something real to someone safe and staying present long enough to let the nervous system register what actually happens, which is usually not what it predicted. Because the fear says, if they see you, they'll leave. But the experience, again and again in safe relationships, says something different. It says, I saw you, and I'm still here. That moment, small, quiet, unremarkable from the outside, is the moment the nervous system begins to update its oldest belief. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly. The way all real healing happens, one honest moment at a time. You were not broken when you learned to hide. You were surviving. You were doing exactly what your nervous system needed to do to protect something that felt fragile and precious and worth protecting. But you are not that fragile anymore. And the thing you've been protecting all this time, the real, complete, contradictory, unglamorous, deeply worthy version of you, that is precisely the version that is capable of being loved. Not despite what it is, because of it. Hit subscribe if this landed somewhere you don't usually let things land. And if you want to understand why the people who love hardest are often the ones most afraid of love, that video is next. You already know you need to watch it.